Story 1. The Ghost Convoy of Interstate 90. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been driving long-haul routes through the northern states for 17 years. I've seen blizzards that turned entire highways into white tombs, ice storms that transformed semis into metal coffins, and wind chills that could freeze diesel in the lines. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on Interstate 90 during the blizzard of February 2019. I was hauling refrigerated pharmaceuticals from Seattle to Boston, a route I'd driven maybe 300 times before. The weather forecast had been calling for heavy snow across Montana and North Dakota, but I'd driven through worse. My rig was a 2018 Peterbilt 579 with every cold weather modification you could imagine. Engine block heaters, auxiliary power units, winter-grade fuel additives, and enough chains to outfit a medieval dungeon. I had my CB radio tuned to channel 19, my GPS running dual satellites, and enough emergency supplies in the sleeper cab to survive a week if I got stranded. The storm hit harder than predicted around 3 p.m., just as I was passing through Billings, Montana. Within 20 minutes, visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet. The wind was pushing 60 miles per hour, creating whiteout conditions that made the road disappear completely. I could barely see my own hood. The temperature had dropped to negative 18 degrees, and with wind chill, it felt like negative 45. My wipers were working overtime, ice building up on the blades faster than the defrosters could melt it. I'd been monitoring the CB chatter, listening to other drivers reporting conditions up ahead. Most were pulling off at truck stops, waiting out the storm. But I had a delivery deadline, and these pharmaceuticals were time-sensitive. Cancer medications, immunosuppressants, stuff that people needed to stay alive. I made the decision to push forward, keeping my speed at around 30 miles per hour, following the barely visible reflector posts along the shoulder. Around 6 p.m., as full darkness settled over the highway, I noticed something strange. Through the swirling snow ahead, I could make out red taillights. Another truck, maybe a quarter-mile in front of me. I felt a surge of relief. Following another driver's lights would make navigation easier. I keyed my CB radio. Breaker, this is Nighthawk running eastbound on I-90, just past Billings. Got a visual on a rig about a quarter-mile ahead. You got your ears on, driver. Static. Then more static. I tried again, switching through channels. Nothing. Could be his radio was down, or he was just staying off the air. Not uncommon in weather like this, when you're concentrating hard on not ending up in a ditch. I maintained my distance, keeping those taillights in view. After about 30 minutes of following, I noticed other lights appearing through the snow. More trucks, maybe 4 or 5 of them, all running in a loose convoy formation. The lead truck's lights were the brightest, and behind them, the others followed at regular intervals. It was actually smart strategy. Convoy driving in blizzard conditions meant multiple sets of eyes watching for hazards, and if one truck got stuck, the others could help. I increased my speed slightly to catch up with the convoy, wanting to fall in line with them. As I got closer, maybe 100 yards behind the last truck, I could make out more details. They were all older rigs, models from the 1990s and early 2000s. The kind of trucks you didn't see much anymore on major interstate routes. The last one in line was an ancient Freightliner classic, probably from 1995 or so, with the distinctive raised cab and chrome everywhere. I tried the CB again. Breaker 19, this is Nighthawk attempting to join the convoy eastbound on 90, requesting permission to fall in line. Anyone copy? This time I got a response. Sort of. The speaker crackled, and I heard what sounded like a voice, but the words were wrong. They were stretched out, distorted, like someone had recorded them and played the tape at half speed. I couldn't make out what was being said. Then the transmission cut off abruptly. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. I told myself it was just radio interference from the storm. Lightning from snow squalls can create weird electromagnetic effects. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. I maintained my position behind the convoy, watching their taillights cut through the snow. We drove like that for another hour. The storm wasn't letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. The wind was rocking my trailer, and I could feel the wheels losing traction every few seconds despite the chains. But those trucks ahead kept moving at a steady pace, never slowing, never wavering. That's when I noticed the second strange thing. My GPS showed Interstate 90 running straight through this section of Montana, dead straight for about 40 miles. But the road we were on was curving. Not sharp curves, but gentle, sweeping bends that shouldn't have been there. I checked my GPS again, thinking maybe I'd taken a wrong turn somehow. But no, it showed me still on I-90. The blue dot representing my truck was on the road, but the road on the screen didn't match what I was experiencing. I slowed down a bit, letting the gap between me and the convoy widen. Something was very wrong. I'd driven this stretch of I-90 hundreds of times. I knew every mile marker, every exit, every curve. And this section was straight. Absolutely, geometrically straight. But we were turning. The CB crackled again. This time, the voice was clearer, but still wrong. It sounded hollow, echoey, like someone speaking from inside a culvert. Maintain speed. Follow the lights. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. Who is this? I demanded into the microphone. What's going on? The storm is worse ahead. We're taking the safe route. Follow the lights. I looked at my GPS again. We were definitely off course now. The blue dot showing my position had moved away from the highway entirely. But I could look in my mirrors and see nothing but white emptiness. No exit ramps, no roads, just the trucks ahead and the swirling snow. My fuel gauge showed 3/4 of a tank. My trip computer said I'd driven 63 miles since passing through Billings. But according to my GPS, I'd only traveled 28 miles. The numbers didn't add up. I felt my heart rate increasing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The convoy ahead started to slow down. I saw brake lights flashing in sequence down the line. I eased off my accelerator, downshifting to help with braking on the ice. Through the windshield, I could see we were approaching something. A structure of some kind, barely visible through the snow. As we got closer, the structure took shape. It was a truck stop, but not like any truck stop I'd ever seen. It looked ancient, like something from the 1960s or 70s. A single-story building with a peaked roof, old-style gas pumps with mechanical number wheels, and a flickering neon sign that just said, "Fuel," in faded blue letters. There were no modern LED signs advertising diesel prices, no brightly lit convenience store, no other vehicles except the convoy trucks that were now pulling into the parking area. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep driving, to blow past this place and find my way back to the real I-90. But my fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should have been, and the temperature gauge was climbing. I needed to stop, to check my systems, to figure out what the hell was happening. I pulled into the lot behind the other trucks. As soon as I set my parking brake, the CB crackled again. "Don't get out. Don't leave your cab. Stay inside. Lock your doors." I stared at the radio. What? Why? What's going on? No response, just static. I looked out at the other trucks. Their engines were still running, diesel smoke mixing with the falling snow. I could see drivers in some of the cabs, silhouettes behind foggy windows. But none of them were moving. They just sat there, engines idling, as if waiting for something. The building's door opened. A figure emerged, moving toward the trucks. It was hard to see details through the snow, but the person's movements were strange. Jerky, unnatural, like stop-motion animation. They approached the first truck in line, the lead vehicle. The driver's door opened, and I saw the trucker step out. I grabbed my binoculars from the dashboard, trying to get a better look. Through the lenses, fighting against the snow and darkness, I could see the figure more clearly. It was dressed in old-style service station clothes, the kind mechanics wore decades ago, but the face was wrong. It was too pale, too smooth, like a mannequin, and the eyes were completely black. The trucker who'd stepped out of his rig walked toward the building with the figure. His movements were stiff, mechanical. They disappeared inside together. Minutes passed. The trucker didn't come back out. The figure emerged again, alone, and moved to the second truck. The same thing happened. Driver gets out, walks to the building, doesn't return. Then the third truck, fourth, fifth. The figure was approaching the sixth truck now, the old Freightliner Classic that had been directly ahead of me in the convoy. I realized with dawning horror that I was going to be next. I turned my key, firing up the engine. It had been idling, but I needed full power. The figure turned toward my truck as if sensing my intention to flee. It started moving faster, that same jerky, unnatural gait, but covering ground impossibly quick. I slammed the shifter into gear and hit the accelerator. The wheels spun on the ice, chains biting, and the truck lurched forward. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away from that place. Behind me, through my mirrors, I could see the figure standing in the parking lot, watching me go. I drove blind into the storm, following nothing but instinct. The GPS was useless, showing me in the middle of empty terrain with no roads. But I could feel asphalt under my wheels, could see faint reflector posts through the snow. I pushed the truck as hard as I dared, 50 miles per hour in near-zero visibility, knowing I was risking my life, but more afraid of what was behind me than what was ahead. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I saw lights ahead, real lights. The familiar glow of a modern truck stop, a pilot travel center with LED signs, and a packed parking lot. I pulled in, found a space, and immediately grabbed my phone. No signal back at that other place, but here I had full bars. I pulled up Google Maps to see where the hell I actually was. The map loaded, and I felt my blood turn cold. According to my location data, I was at the pilot just east of Billings, the same pilot I'd passed 4 hours ago. I'd driven in a giant circle, but my odometer showed I'd traveled 147 miles. My fuel gauge showed I'd burned through nearly 3/4 of a tank. I got out of my cab on shaking legs and walked to the main building. Inside, I found a Montana Highway Patrol trooper getting coffee. I told him about the convoy, the impossible truck stop, the figure. He listened patiently, then pulled out his tablet computer and showed me something. "Sir, I-90 has been officially closed for the last 6 hours. There's no traffic out there. You couldn't have been following anyone." "But I saw them," I insisted. 6 trucks, older models, all running together. He gave me a long look, the kind of look that said he'd heard crazy shit from truck drivers before. Then he pulled up something else on his tablet. "We get reports sometimes," he said, quietly. "Especially during bad storms on this stretch. Drivers talk about seeing a convoy of old trucks, always during the worst weather, always at night. Some follow them and end up lost. Some disappear entirely. He paused. Back in February 1982, 7 trucks left Billings during a blizzard. They were running together, staying in contact by CB. None of them ever reached their destinations. They found one of the trucks 3 months later, buried in snow about 30 miles north of the highway. The driver was still in the cab, frozen. The weird thing was, his logbook showed he'd been driving for 16 hours, straight after leaving Billings. But the truck was only 30 miles away, and the fuel tank was bone dry, even though his fuel receipts showed he'd filled up just before the storm hit. I felt sick. What about the other 6 trucks? Never found them. There's a theory that they're still out there, driving through some kind of loop. And during major blizzards they appear, trying to lead other drivers to wherever they ended up. Some kind of ghost convoy. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my cab at that pilot, engine running, lights on, waiting for dawn and clearer weather. When the storm finally broke around 9 a.m., I got back on I-90 and delivered my pharmaceuticals to Boston. But I requested a route change after that. I don't drive through Montana anymore, especially not in winter. 3 months later, I was having a beer at a truck stop in Pennsylvania when I heard a driver talking about seeing a convoy of old trucks during a blizzard in North Dakota. He said he followed them for an hour before his GPS went haywire, and he realized they were off the highway. He'd managed to turn around and find his way back. I asked him what the lead truck looked like. He described an older Kenworth, probably from the early 1990s, with specific details about the chrome work. I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. That was one of the trucks I'd seen in the convoy I followed. They're still out there, driving through storms that normal people hide from, appearing on radar just long enough to lure other drivers into following them. I don't know where they're trying to go, or why they keep appearing, but I know enough to recognize them now. And if I ever see those taillights again through falling snow, I'll do whatever it takes to go the opposite direction. Story 2. The Frozen Hitchhiker. Daniel Kovacs here. I've been driving refrigerated freight for 22 years, specializing in routes through the upper Midwest during winter months. Most drivers try to avoid the worst weather, but I've always felt more comfortable in the snow. Growing up in northern Michigan, I learned to drive on ice before I learned to drive on dry pavement. The solitude of winter highways, the challenge of keeping a rig under control in conditions that would terrify most people, it's always suited me. At least, it did until January 2021. I was running a load of frozen seafood from Duluth, Minnesota, to Detroit, Michigan. The route took me across the northern edge of Wisconsin and through Michigan's Upper Peninsula, some of the most desolate country in the lower 48 states. The forecast was calling for a major winter storm, but I'd left early hoping to beat the worst of it. My rig was a 2019 Kenworth T680 with every cold weather option available, and I was pulling a 53-foot Thermo King reefer trailer set to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The storm caught me around 2 a.m. on Highway 2, about 40 miles west of St. Ignace. The snow came down so thick, it looked like someone was dumping it from the sky with a shovel. Temperature was negative 25, wind chill pushing it down to negative 50. These weren't conditions where you wanted to be outside for more than a minute or two. Exposed skin would freeze in less than 5 minutes. I'd slowed to about 20 miles per hour, following the reflectors and the faint outline of snowplows that had passed through earlier. The CB was quiet, not another vehicle on the road as far as I could tell. I had maybe 3 hours to go before reaching St. Ignace, where I planned to hole up and wait for the roads to clear. That's when my headlights caught something on the shoulder ahead. A figure standing beside the road, arm extended in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. I eased off the accelerator, squinting through the snow. Who the hell would be out in this weather? And how had they even gotten there? There were no other vehicles, no houses, nothing but pine forest on both sides of the road. As I got closer, I could see it was a woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing jeans and a thin jacket. No hat, no gloves. Her dark hair was covered in snow, and she was standing perfectly still. Not shivering, not moving, just standing with her thumb out. I pulled over, my brain screaming that something was wrong, but my human decency overriding it. Nobody could survive more than a few minutes in this cold without proper gear. I grabbed my CB microphone, more out of habit than anything. Breaker, breaker. This is Ice Road running eastbound on Highway 2 near mile marker 237. Got a stranded motorist here. Anyone copy? Nothing but static. I set the mic down and reached for my parka. Before I could open the door, I heard a knock on the passenger side. I jumped, my heart hammering. The woman was there, at my passenger door, 9 feet off the ground, somehow having climbed up without me seeing or hearing her. I leaned over and opened the door. She climbed in, moving stiffly, and sat down. Snow covered her clothes and hair, but she didn't brush it off. She didn't say anything, just stared straight ahead through the windshield. "Jesus, are you okay?" I asked. "What happened? Where's your car?" She turned to look at me, and I saw her eyes for the first time. They were pale blue, almost white, and there was something off about her gaze. It was too steady, too focused, like she was looking through me rather than at me. "I need to get to St. Ignace," she said. Her voice was flat, emotionless, and her lips barely moved when she spoke. "That's where I'm headed," I said. "But we need to get you warmed up. You're hypothermic. I've got emergency blankets in the back." I reached for my first aid kit, but she grabbed my wrist. Her hand was ice cold, so cold it burned through my sleeve. "Just drive," she said. I pulled my hand away and put the truck in gear. Something was very wrong here, but I couldn't just throw her back out into the storm. I'd get her to St. Ignace, drop her at a hospital, and let medical professionals deal with whatever was going on. We drove in silence for about 10 minutes. I kept glancing over at her. She hadn't moved, hadn't adjusted her position, hadn't even blinked as far as I could tell. The snow on her clothes wasn't melting, despite the cab being heated to 72 degrees. Water should have been running off her jacket, pooling on the seat. But the snow just sat there, crystalline and frozen. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. "Sarah," she said after a long pause. "Sarah Mitchell. I'm Daniel. What were you doing out there, Sarah? Where's your car?" "I broke down," she said in that same flat voice. 3 days ago." 3 days? I almost swerved off the road. "That's impossible. You couldn't survive 3 days in this weather without shelter." She turned to look at me again with those pale, disturbing eyes. I didn't survive. The temperature in the cab dropped. I mean, literally dropped, like someone had opened all the windows. My breath came out in visible clouds. The heater was running full blast, but frost started forming on the inside of the windshield. I reached for the temperature controls, and my fingers stuck to the metal knobs. When I pulled them away, I left skin behind. "What the fuck?" I shouted, more from fear than pain. I looked at Sarah. She was smiling now, but it wasn't a human smile. her lips pulled back too far, revealing too many teeth, all of them perfectly white and sharp. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said. "You should have kept driving." I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding on the ice before coming to a stop. "Get out. Get out right now." She didn't move. The cold was intensifying, so severe I could feel ice forming in my nose when I breathed. The windows were completely frosted over now. I couldn't see outside at all. "I can't leave," Sarah said. "I've been waiting. 3 days, standing on that shoulder, watching trucks pass by. Finally, someone stopped. Finally, someone let me in. Do you know what it's like? Being dead but not able to leave. Frozen in place, watching the world go by. Unable to move or speak or feel anything except the cold." I fumbled for the door handle, but my fingers wouldn't work right. They were turning white, frostbite setting in impossibly fast. I could feel my core, temperature dropping, my thoughts getting sluggish. "My car broke down," she continued, her voice still eerily emotionless. "A bearing seized in the engine. I tried to call for help, but there was no signal. I decided to walk to the next town. I didn't realize how far it was. The cold hit so fast. I couldn't feel my fingers, then my hands, then my arms. I tried to go back to my car, but I couldn't remember which direction it was. I just kept walking, getting colder and colder, until I couldn't walk anymore. I laid down in the snow. It wasn't so bad after a while. Almost peaceful. And then I was standing on the shoulder, watching for headlights, waiting for someone to stop. I tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. The diesel had gelled despite the anti-gel additives. Everything was freezing, the truck becoming a metal tomb. "Now you're going to feel it too," Sarah said. "The cold, the endless numbing cold. And when you're frozen, when you can't move or speak or do anything but exist in that moment forever, maybe you'll understand. Maybe you'll wait by the road too, looking for someone to share it with." I don't remember much after that. Just the cold, getting deeper and deeper. My vision dimming, my heart slowing. I remember thinking about my wife, my kids, how I'd never see them again, how I'd die in this truck, frozen solid, because I'd made the mistake of being a good Samaritan. I woke up 12 hours later in a hospital in St. Ignace. A snowplow driver had found my truck at 2 p.m., completely buried in snow. I was in the cab, unconscious, core temperature at 83 degrees, severe hypothermia, frostbite on my hands and feet. The doctors said it was a miracle I was alive. They asked what happened. I told them about the hitchhiker. They exchanged glances, the kind of looks medical professionals give each other when they think someone is delirious or crazy. A state trooper came by later. He asked about Sarah Mitchell. "Did you get her name from a driver's license?" he asked carefully. "No, she told me." "Why?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. It was a driver's license photo of a woman, the same woman who'd gotten into my truck. "Sarah Mitchell's car was found 3 miles from where you were recovered," he said. "She was in the vehicle, dead. The coroner estimated she'd been deceased for 3 to 4 days. Cause of death was hypothermia." I stared at the photo. "That's impossible. She was in my truck. She talked to me." "Sir, her body was frozen solid. She never left her vehicle. We checked the security footage from your truck's dash cam. You pulled over, you sat there for about 10 minutes, and then you just stopped moving. There was nobody else in the cab. You talked to an empty seat." They kept me for psychiatric evaluation for 2 days. Said I'd experienced a severe hallucination brought on by hypothermia and exposure. That my mind had created the hitchhiker as a manifestation of my own fear of freezing to death. They gave me medication, had me talk to counselors, and eventually released me with orders to take time off from driving. But I know what I experienced. I felt her cold hand on my wrist. I heard her voice. I saw her smile. And sometimes, late at night, I still feel that deep, bone-penetrating cold, like something frozen has wrapped itself around my heart and won't let go. I lost 3 toes and 2 fingers to frostbite. I can't drive anymore, not with my hands the way they are. Sometimes I think that was her gift to me, forcing me off the road so I'd never be able to help another stranded motorist, so I'd never stop for someone in need. Last winter, my replacement driver on that Detroit route reported something strange. He said he was driving through the same stretch of Highway 2 during a blizzard when he saw a woman hitchhiking. He almost stopped, he said, but something made him keep going. In his rearview mirror, he saw her standing there, arm outstretched, and beside her was a man in a trucker's jacket who looked just like me. I haven't driven through Michigan's Upper Peninsula since. Story 3. The Backward Mile. My name is Rebecca Torres, and for 8 years I drove specialized medical transport, hauling things like dialysis machines, portable MRI equipment, and emergency supplies to rural hospitals across the northern plains states. It's demanding work that combines the challenges of long-haul trucking with the precision of medical logistics. You can't just throw these machines around. They're calibrated instruments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and hospitals are depending on them to save lives. In December 2020, I got an urgent call for a transport from Fargo, North Dakota to Bismarck. A rural hospital needed a replacement dialysis machine. Their primary unit had failed, and they had patients who would die without treatment. The storm rolling across the state was predicted to be one of the worst in years, but this was life or death. I loaded up my 2017 International LT with the machine, secured it properly in my climate-controlled trailer, and headed out. The storm hit around 4 p.m. as I was passing through a section of I-94 that runs arrow straight through absolutely flat prairie land. For miles in every direction, there's nothing but snow-covered fields. No towns, no trees, nothing to break the wind or provide landmarks. The visibility dropped to near zero within minutes. I slowed to a crawl, maybe 15 miles per hour, following the rumble strips on the shoulder to keep myself oriented. I'd been monitoring my GPS and odometer closely. There was a rest area coming up in exactly 14 miles, and I planned to pull in there to wait out the worst of the storm. But as I drove, I noticed something odd. The mile markers weren't matching my odometer. I'd passed mile marker 211. Then after driving what my trip computer said was 1 full mile, I passed mile marker 211 again. I thought maybe I'd misread it the first time. The snow was heavy, visibility was terrible, easy to make a mistake. I reset my trip odometer and watched carefully. The numbers ticked up: 0.1 miles, 0.2 miles, 0.5 miles, 1.0 miles. Right at 1.0 miles, my headlights illuminated another mile marker. Number 211. I'd just driven a mile and ended up at the same place. I checked my GPS. It showed me moving along I-94, the blue dot progressing eastward at a steady 15 miles per hour. But the mile markers said I wasn't moving at all. Or worse, I was moving but not going anywhere. I tried the CB radio. Breaker 19. This is Medtrans running eastbound on 94. Anyone copy? I'm having some navigation issues here. Static. Then a burst of distorted sound that might have been a voice, but was too broken up to understand. I tried my cell phone. No signal, which wasn't surprising given the weather and the remoteness of this stretch. I kept driving. What else could I do? The storm was getting worse, and stopping meant risking getting completely buried. After another mile, according to my odometer, I saw mile marker 211 again, then again, and again. I'd been driving for 30 minutes, and according to my instruments, I'd covered 7 miles. But I kept passing the same mile marker over and over. The same small drainage culvert. The same bent fence post on the right side of the highway. Every single mile, the exact same landmarks in the exact same positions. My fuel gauge was dropping normally, the engine running steadily, but I wasn't making any real progress. I was stuck in some kind of loop, driving the same mile over and over. I tried turning around. I slowed down, checked my mirrors, and executed a careful U-turn in the middle of the highway, figuring if I went backward, maybe I could break out of whatever was happening. I headed west, back toward Fargo. After 1 mile, I saw mile marker 211, then mile marker 211 again, then again. No matter which direction I drove, I ended up passing the same marker, seeing the same landmarks, driving the same stretch of highway on infinite repeat. The rational part of my brain tried to find logical explanations. Maybe the storm was disorienting me. Maybe I was experiencing some kind of carbon monoxide exposure that was affecting my perception. Maybe my instruments were malfunctioning. But I'd check the marker number carefully each time, and it was always 201. Always the same number, in the same place, with the same small patch of rust on the lower right corner of the sign. I'd been trapped in this loop for over an hour when I noticed the second truck. It appeared in my mirrors, headlights cutting through the snow, coming up behind me fast. Too fast for the conditions. I watched it approach, and as it got closer, I realized it was another International LT, almost identical to mine. Same color scheme, same configuration. It pulled up alongside me, matching my speed. I looked over, trying to see the driver through the snow and darkness. What I saw made my blood freeze. It was me. The driver was me. Same face, same hair, same company jacket. She was looking straight ahead, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, expression completely blank. I laid on my horn, shouting even though she couldn't hear me. But she didn't react. She just kept driving, maintaining perfect parallel speed with my truck. Then I saw the third truck, also an International LT, also with a driver who looked exactly like me. It pulled up on my left side. Then a fourth appeared, squeezing between me and the first duplicate. Then more, emerging from the snow. All identical trucks with identical drivers, all of us driving in perfect formation. I counted 13 trucks total, all running side by side on a highway that should only have 2 lanes. We drove together for what felt like hours, this impossible convoy of duplicates, all passing the same mile marker over and over. I tried everything to break free. I accelerated, but the other trucks matched my speed. I braked hard, but they braked with me, maintaining perfect spacing. I turned my wheels, but the truck wouldn't deviate from its lane, no matter how hard I cranked the steering wheel. The storm intensified. The wind was hitting speeds of 80 miles per hour, but none of our trucks were affected. We just kept rolling along in our perfect formation, untouched by the forces that should have been pushing us around. That's when I started noticing the changes. Small things at first. The dashboard controls weren't quite in the right positions. The seat felt different. The mirror angles were wrong. And when I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel, they seemed unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else. I looked to my right, at the nearest duplicate truck. The driver was looking back at me now. Her eyes were wide, terrified, and she was mouthing something. I realized she was me, the real me, and I was the duplicate. Or maybe we both were. Maybe all 13 of us were duplicates of some original driver who'd gotten trapped in this loop days or weeks or years ago. The mile marker appeared again. 201. But this time, something was different. There was a figure standing beside it. A person in a heavy parka, hood up, face hidden. As we drove past, the figure raised an arm and pointed at the truck in the center of our convoy. The 7th truck, the middle one. All 13 of us turned our heads in perfect synchronization to look at that truck. The driver, another me, was screaming. I couldn't hear her, but I could see her mouth open wide, her face contorted in terror. Her truck started to fade, becoming translucent, and then it was gone. Vanished completely. The other trucks closed ranks, maintaining their formation, now 12 instead of 13. We drove past mile marker 201 again. This time, the figure pointed at a different truck. The driver faded and disappeared. 11 trucks now. I understood. Whatever had trapped us here was taking us one by one. We'd keep driving this backward mile until we all disappeared, consumed by something that existed in this impossible space between distances. This loop where physics didn't work right, and the same mile repeated endlessly. I hammered on my horn, tried my radio, flashed my lights, anything to draw the attention of the outside world. But there was no outside world. There was only the snow, the highway, mile marker 201, and the steadily dwindling convoy of identical trucks. The figure pointed again. Another truck vanished. Then another. 10 trucks. 9. 8. I didn't want to die here, trapped in an endless loop, erased from existence on a stretch of highway that shouldn't exist. I thought about my family, my friends, everyone I'd never see again. I thought about the hospital waiting for the dialysis machine, the patients who needed it. I thought about all the things I hadn't done, hadn't said, hadn't experienced. 7 trucks. 6. 5. The figure was pointing faster now, taking us more quickly. 4 trucks. 3. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see myself disappear. I didn't want to watch that final moment when I faded from existence. I just wanted to remember something real, something true, something that proved I had existed outside this nightmare. I heard a sound, a loud, deep horn, not a truck horn, something bigger, an air horn. I opened my eyes. I was on I-94, but the other trucks were gone. In my rearview mirror, I saw a snowplow, lights flashing, horn blaring. The driver was waving at me, gesturing for me to follow. I fell in behind him, and he led me 3 miles down the highway to the rest area I'd been trying to reach. I pulled into the parking lot and sat there shaking for 20 minutes before I could even turn off my engine. My GPS showed I'd traveled 18 miles from my last known position. My fuel gauge matched that distance, but I had no memory of those miles. The last thing I remembered was passing mile marker 211 and seeing my truck start to fade. I checked my dashcam footage. It showed me driving normally along the highway, following the snowplow, reaching the rest area. There were no duplicate trucks, no figure beside the mile marker, no endless loop. Just normal driving in terrible weather. But my trip odometer told a different story. It showed I'd driven 63 miles. The GPS said 18. That's 45 miles unaccounted for. 45 miles of the same mile, driven over and over while something picked off versions of me one by one. I delivered the dialysis machine to Bismarck the next morning. Nobody there knew anything had happened. To them, I'd just driven through a storm like truckers do. But I know the truth. I know there's a place on I-94 where the miles don't add up, where you can drive forward and end up in the same place, where duplicates of yourself appear and disappear until nothing remains. I transferred to southern routes after that. I don't drive through North Dakota anymore. But sometimes Late at night on an empty highway, I'll see a mile marker and feel a jolt of panic, wondering if it's the same one I just passed, wondering if I'm about to see my own truck appear in my mirrors, wondering if this time I won't escape. They say there are 12 trucks still out there, driving that backward mile, waiting for the figure to point at them. I wonder if one of them is the real me, and I'm just a duplicate who got lucky enough to escape. I wonder if someday I'll fade away, and another version of me will wake up behind the wheel with no memory of the miles she didn't travel. Story 4. The Whiteout Voices. Thomas Brennan is my name, and I've been a long-haul trucker for 26 years, primarily running routes through the Canadian provinces during winter. It takes a certain kind of person to handle the Trans-Canada Highway in January, when temperatures drop to -40 and blizzards can strand you for days. I'd always prided myself on being that kind of person, the type who could navigate through conditions that would break lesser drivers. That confidence lasted until March 2018, when I learned that some storms don't just test your driving skills, they test your grip on reality itself. I was hauling a load of manufacturing equipment from Winnipeg to Thunder Bay, a route I'd driven maybe 200 times before. The weather forecast was concerning but not catastrophic, calling for heavy snow, but nothing I hadn't handled before. My truck was a 2016 Volvo VNL 780 with a full winter package, auxiliary heating, and enough emergency supplies to survive a week in the wilderness if necessary. I'd learned long ago that preparation was the difference between life and death on these northern routes. The storm hit around 7 p.m., about an hour after I crossed into Ontario. Within 15 minutes, it transformed from moderate snowfall into a full whiteout. I've driven through plenty of whiteouts before. They're disorienting, dangerous, but manageable if you stay calm and follow procedure. Keep your speed down, watch for reflectors, maintain your position between the rumble strips. Basic stuff. But this was different. The snow wasn't just heavy, it was weird. It fell in patterns, swirling in ways that created shapes in the air. Faces, almost. Like the snow was trying to form itself into human features before dissolving back into random chaos. I blinked hard, figuring it was just my tired brain, finding patterns where none existed. Humans are wired to see faces, especially when stressed or exhausted. That's when I heard the first voice. It came through my CB radio, clear and distinct despite the static from the storm. A woman's voice, calm and professional. "Thomas, you need to slow down. There's black ice ahead, quarter mile." I checked my speedometer. I was doing 40, which was already cautious for the conditions. But I eased off further, dropping to 30. Sure enough, about 20 seconds later, I felt my wheels start to lose traction. Black ice under the snow. If I'd been going faster, I might have lost control. I grabbed my CB mic. "Breaker 19, this is Northern Hauler running westbound on Trans-Canada. Who just gave me the heads up on that ice? Thanks for the warning." Static, just wind and interference. "Come on, somebody just used this channel. Identify yourself so I can thank you properly." Nothing. I tried other channels, cycling through them all. Every single one was dead air, except for the howl of the storm. I told myself it must have been another trucker who'd passed this section earlier, warning drivers behind him, even though I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. Even though the warning had used my actual name, which wasn't exactly common knowledge. 20 minutes later, I heard another voice. This one was male, older, with a gravelly quality that suggested decades of cigarettes and diesel fumes. "Tom, There's a car off the road ahead, right side, about half a mile. Hazards are still flashing. You might want to check if they need help. I slowed down, scanning the shoulder. My high beams barely penetrated 10 feet into the swirling snow, but I kept watch. At roughly half a mile by my odometer, I saw the lights. A sedan, nose down in a ditch, hazard lights pulsing weakly. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight and parka. The temperature was -38, wind chill pushing it even lower. I approached the car carefully, mindful of the ice and the limited visibility. The driver's side window was down, and inside was a young man, maybe 25, shivering violently. "Thank God," he stammered. "My phone's dead. I've been stuck here for 2 hours." I helped him back to my truck, got him settled in the sleeper cab with blankets and hot coffee from my thermos. He was on the edge of serious hypothermia, but would be okay. I called for emergency services on my satellite phone, gave them our location, and was told a rescue vehicle would arrive within 45 minutes. After he was safely handed off to the paramedics, I got back on the road. I tried to figure out who had warned me about the stranded car. The voice on my CB had been so clear, so specific. Half a mile, right side, hazards flashing. Every detail had been accurate. "Okay," I said aloud to my empty cab. "Whoever you are, if you're listening, thank you. You might have saved that kid's life." "You're welcome, Tom." The same gravelly male voice coming through the CB. "But you need to focus now. The storm's getting worse, much worse." "Who is this?" I demanded. "How are you monitoring my position? How did you know about that car?" "We're always here, Tom, in the snow, in the static, in the space between channels. We watch over drivers like you. We try to help when we can." My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and it had nothing to do with the cold. "What do you mean, we? Who are you people?" A third voice answered, this one belonging to a younger woman. "We're the ones who didn't make it, Tom. The drivers who got caught in storms like this and never found their way out. We're stuck in the whiteout, existing in the spaces between. But we can still see. We can still warn. We can still try to save others from joining us." I felt ice water run through my veins. "This isn't funny. Whoever you are, this is a sick joke." "Not a joke," said a fourth voice, elderly and female. "We're trying to help you, Thomas. This storm isn't natural. It's a collector. It takes drivers, adds them to us. We've been fighting it for years, decades, some of us, trying to guide others through before it can claim them." "This is insane," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew something was wrong. The storm was behaving strangely. The snow patterns were too regular, too purposeful. And the voices, they all had one thing in common. They sounded distant, echoey, like they were speaking from somewhere very far away, or somewhere that didn't quite exist. "Listen very carefully," said the first voice, the calm woman. "In approximately 3 miles, you're going to see an exit. The sign will say rest area, half a mile. Do not take that exit. It's not real. It's how the storm traps drivers. You'll think you're reaching safety, but you'll end up somewhere else. Somewhere you can't escape from." "What are you talking about? Rest areas don't just appear out of nowhere." "This one does," said the gravelly man. "We've all seen it. Most of us took it. That's why we're here now, stuck in the storm, trying to warn others. Don't make our mistake, Tom." I didn't know what to believe. But 3 miles later, I saw the sign, exactly as described. A green highway sign indicating a rest area, half a mile ahead. The exit ramp was visible, snow-covered but clear. Every instinct I had screamed at me to take it. I was exhausted, the storm was getting worse, and the promise of shelter was overwhelming. "Don't do it, Tom." The voices came through in chorus now, all of them speaking at once. "Keep driving. Stay on the highway. It's only another 16 miles to the real rest stop in Marathon. You can make it. We'll guide you." I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. The exit was right there. But something about that sign was wrong. The letters were too perfect, too clean despite the storm. And the distance markers leading up to it didn't match the spacing of normal highway markers. I drove past the exit. The moment I passed it, my rearview mirror showed something impossible. The exit ramp was filled with trucks. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all parked at odd angles, covered in snow, looking like they'd been there for years. And standing among them were figures, shadowy and indistinct, watching my truck recede into the distance. "Good," said the calm woman's voice. "You made the right choice. Now listen carefully. The next 17 minutes are critical. We're going to guide you through, but you have to trust us. Do exactly what we say, exactly when we say it." For the next 17 minutes, the voices directed me with precision. "Ease left. There's a drift forming. Slow to 20. Ice patch ahead. Speed up to 35. You need momentum for this hill. Brake gently. There's a stalled transport in your lane. Merge right." Every instruction was accurate. Every warning saved me from disaster. I started to trust them, these impossible voices of trapped truckers who somehow existed in the storm itself. "Almost there, Tom," said the gravelly man. "2 more miles. You're going to make it." "What happens to you?" I asked. "If I make it out, do you get free?" Silence for a long moment. Then the elderly woman spoke, her voice infinitely sad. "No, dear. We stay here. But knowing we saved someone, that makes it bearable. That gives us purpose." "How many drivers have you saved?" 17, said the young woman. "Over the years. 17 who trusted us enough to listen." "And how many have you lost?" Another silence. "More than we can count." The lights of Marathon appeared through the snow, the real rest stop with its trucks and buildings and signs of human activity. As I pulled into the parking lot, the voices came through one last time, all of them speaking together. "Stay safe, Tom. And if you hear us again someday, in another storm, on another highway, help us guide the next driver. Help us save them. It's all we can do from where we are." The CB went silent. I tried calling back to them, but there was no response. Just normal CB chatter, as other drivers reported conditions and shared information. I sat in that parking lot for 3 hours, engine idling, trying to process what had happened. Finally, I called my dispatcher, told him I needed a mental health break, and drove to the nearest city where I could see a doctor. The psychiatrist listened to my story and diagnosed me with acute stress reaction, possibly complicated by mild hypothermia and sensory deprivation. He said the isolation of long-haul trucking, combined with the disorienting effects of whiteout conditions, could create hallucinations that seemed completely real. He prescribed medication and recommended I take 2 weeks off before driving again. But I knew what I'd experienced was real. Those voices had saved my life. And when I finally got back on the road and checked the news archives, I found something that confirmed it. Over the past 30 years, 41 commercial trucks had gone missing on that stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway during winter storms. Gone without a trace. No wreckage found, no bodies recovered, just vanished, as if they'd driven off the edge of the world. I still drive that route, but only during clear weather now. I've heard the voices 3 more times since then, always during the worst storms, always trying to warn me about dangers ahead. I listen to them now. I trust them. And sometimes, when the storm is particularly bad and I'm fighting to keep my truck on the road, I wonder if I'm really talking to ghosts, or if I'm hearing the voices of people who exist in some parallel version of the highway, trapped in an eternal storm, doing what they can to save drivers in our reality. Last winter, I was monitoring the CB during a massive blizzard, safely parked at a truck stop, when I heard a new voice join the chorus. A man's voice, recent and clear. There's a car off the road ahead, half a mile on the right, hazards flashing. Someone should check on them. It was the same warning I'd heard years ago. The same words, the same urgent tone. But it was being given by a different voice to a different driver on a different night. The cycle continues. The voices in the whiteout keep trying to save people, keep fighting against whatever took them. I think about them often. I wonder if someday, if I'm unlucky enough to be caught in the wrong storm at the wrong time, my voice will join theirs. If I'll become another echo in the static, another ghost in the snow, warning future drivers about dangers they can't see. It's a terrifying thought, but there's something noble about it too, something beautiful about trapped souls who found purpose in their suffering, who spend eternity trying to save others from their fate. Story 5. The Frozen Facility. My name is Marcus Webb, and for 14 years I drove hazardous materials transport, specializing in chemical deliveries to industrial facilities across the northern United States. It's specialized work that requires additional licensing, extensive safety training, and the kind of attention to detail that keeps you alive when you're hauling materials that could kill thousands if something goes wrong. I took that responsibility seriously, maintained perfect safety records, and never had so much as a minor incident. At least, not until February 2022. I was transporting industrial solvents from a chemical plant in Minnesota to a manufacturing facility in Montana, running along Highway 2 through North Dakota. The storm hit fast and hard, one of those sudden Alberta clippers that drops out of Canada, with minimal warning. Within 30 minutes, visibility had gone to near zero, and the temperature plummeted to negative 35 degrees. I was monitoring weather updates through my satellite system when I got a message from my dispatcher. An emergency delivery had been added to my route. A facility was experiencing a critical equipment failure, and they needed a specific compound to prevent a larger disaster. The detour would add about 40 miles to my trip, but the priority level was marked urgent, and the authorization codes checked out. The GPS coordinates led me off Highway 2 onto a state route, then onto progressively smaller roads, until I was on what was barely more than a gravel path. My truck was equipped with enough sensors and warning systems to rival a military vehicle, but I kept getting conflicting readings. The GPS showed the facility location clearly, but my radar was indicating nothing ahead except empty terrain. After driving for 20 minutes through increasingly difficult conditions, I saw lights through the snow. A facility of some kind, industrial buildings with floodlights illuminating snow-covered structures. The complex was larger than I'd expected, maybe 15 or 20 buildings arranged around a central courtyard. There were no signs, no company logos, nothing identifying what this place was or who operated it. I pulled up to what looked like a loading dock and checked my paperwork. The delivery authorization listed a dock number, a contact person, and specific handling instructions. Everything looked legitimate. I grabbed my radio to contact facility personnel. "This is Hazmat Transport Unit, 774 requesting dock supervisor for delivery authorization. Anyone copy? The radio crackled, and a voice responded. Male, professional, but with a strange quality I couldn't quite identify. Copy 774. Proceed to Dock 12. Personnel will meet you there. I maneuvered my truck to the indicated dock. The building doors were open, which was unusual given the temperature. But maybe they were expecting me. I set my parking brake and grabbed my tablet to process the delivery documentation. That's when I noticed the first really wrong thing. There were no footprints in the snow. None. The facility was lit up. Someone had just radioed me. But there wasn't a single track or mark in the pristine snow covering the entire complex. No tire tracks except my own. No paths between buildings. Nothing. I keyed my radio again. Dock Supervisor, this is 774. I'm at Dock 12, but I'm not seeing any personnel. Can you confirm someone's coming to accept delivery? Confirmed. Personnel en route. Please prepare manifests for inspection. I did a visual sweep of the area through my mirrors and windows. The floodlights cast harsh shadows across the snow, but I couldn't see any movement, any vehicles, any sign of human activity. Just empty buildings and falling snow. My chemical sensors suddenly went active, all of them at once. The display panel lit up like a Christmas tree, detecting multiple compounds that shouldn't have been present. Chlorine gas, sulfur dioxide, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. My truck was equipped with a sophisticated filtration system for the cab, so I wasn't in immediate danger, but the readings made no sense. Those chemicals don't occur naturally together, and the concentrations were too high to be ambient readings from my cargo. I grabbed my emergency respirator and opened my door to step out. The moment my boot touched the ground, I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever encountered before. It was mechanical and organic at the same time. A grinding, pulsing noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The kind of sound that made your teeth ache and your stomach clench. The buildings around me were changing. At first I thought it was a trick of the light or the falling snow. But no, they were actually shifting. Walls were bending, angles were wrong, perspectives didn't match what they should be. I was looking at architecture that couldn't exist, structures that violated fundamental laws of physics and geometry. A figure emerged from the nearest building. It was humanoid in shape, but wrong in every detail. The proportions were off, the movements too smooth, the way it walked too precise. It wore what might have been some kind of protective suit, but the material looked like it was part of its body, growing out of rather than worn over. "Welcome," it said in that same strange voice from the radio. "We've been expecting you." I backed toward my truck. "Who are you? What is this place?" "We are the facility. You are delivering materials we require." It gestured toward my trailer. "Please proceed with transfer." "I'm not doing anything until I get proper authorization and identification. This location isn't on my approved delivery list." More figures emerged from other buildings. 5, 10, 20 of them. All with that same wrong appearance, that same too smooth way of moving. They formed a loose circle around my truck. "Authorization is irrelevant," the first figure said. "You are here. Your cargo is required. Transfer will proceed." I climbed back into my cab and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I reached for my satellite phone to call for help. But the phone showed no signal. Not just weak signal, no signal at all, which shouldn't have been possible with satellite communication. I tried the radio. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Hazmat Transport 774. I am at an unknown location and require immediate assistance. Can anyone copy?" Static, then a voice. Not one of the figures outside, but a human voice, distant and distorted. 774, Trap. Leave. Now. The figures were approaching my truck. They moved as one, synchronized, closing the distance with mechanical precision. When they got close enough, I could see their faces through my windshield. They didn't have faces, just smooth surfaces that suggested where features should be, like mannequins that hadn't been fully sculpted. One of them touched my trailer. Where its hand made contact, the metal began to corrode, rusting and degrading at visible speed. Whatever these things were, they were breaking down the molecular structure of my trailer just by touching it. I fired up my engine and threw the truck into gear. The figures didn't try to stop me, just stepped aside as I pulled away from the dock. But as I turned to leave the facility, I realized I couldn't find the way out. The road I'd come in on was gone. In its place were more buildings, more of that impossible architecture, more of those things watching from doorways and windows. I drove in what I thought was the direction of the exit, but the facility kept changing around me. Roads curved in directions that didn't match my steering. Buildings appeared where they shouldn't be. It was like navigating a maze that was actively reconfiguring itself to keep me trapped. My fuel gauge was dropping too fast. I'd had 3/4 of a tank when I arrived, but now it showed less than half. The trip computer said I'd driven 12 miles inside the facility, which was impossible because the whole complex had looked maybe a 1/4 mile across when I'd first seen it. The figures were everywhere now, standing in groups, watching from rooftops, pressed against windows. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all focused on me and my truck. The grinding, pulsing sound was getting louder, more intense, and I realized it was coming from the buildings themselves. The entire facility was alive somehow, a massive organism masquerading as industrial infrastructure. I saw an opening between two buildings, a gap that looked like it might lead to open terrain. I aimed for it, pushing my speed as high as I dared on the snow-covered ground. As I approached, the buildings began to move, closing the gap. I could see the walls literally flowing, reforming, trying to seal off my escape route. I floored the accelerator. My truck hit speeds that would have been suicidal in these conditions, but I didn't care. I was more afraid of what was behind me than what was ahead. The gap was closing, 50 feet, 40, 30. I wasn't going to make it. At the last second, I felt something change. The air pressure shifted, my ears popped, and there was a sensation like passing through a membrane. My truck burst through the gap just as it sealed shut behind me, and suddenly I was on a normal road, in a normal storm, with normal empty fields on either side. I drove for 2 hours straight before I felt safe enough to stop. When I finally pulled into a truck stop in Montana, I inspected my trailer. The side panel where the figure had touched it was completely rusted through, a hole about 2 feet across that showed the interior of my cargo hold. The metal around the hole was degraded, like it had been exposed to corrosive chemicals for years. I called my company to report the incident. They had no record of an emergency delivery or a route change. The coordinates I'd been given showed up on maps as empty prairie land. There was no industrial facility, no buildings, nothing but snow-covered fields for 20 miles in every direction. I insisted on filing a full report. They sent investigators, but they found nothing at the coordinates I'd provided. No structures, no tire tracks, no evidence anything had ever been there. The damage to my trailer was attributed to a manufacturing defect, a weak point in the metal that had failed due to stress and cold. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. That facility exists somewhere, in some version of reality that intersects with ours under specific conditions. And it's hungry for something, collecting things from our world, drawing in drivers who get lost in storms. I quit hazmat transport after that. I couldn't risk ending up there again. I drive local routes now, nothing that takes me out into isolated areas during bad weather. But sometimes, when I'm monitoring the CB radio at night, I hear distorted transmissions. Voices reporting deliveries to facilities that don't exist. Drivers asking for directions to locations that aren't on any map. And sometimes, I respond. I try to warn them, tell them it's a trap, tell them to turn around, tell them to ignore the delivery authorization. Most don't listen. The call of duty is strong, and the instructions seem legitimate. They drive off toward coordinates that will take them somewhere they can't escape from. Last month, I heard a report about a hazmat truck that disappeared during a blizzard in North Dakota. The driver was experienced. The truck was equipped with every safety system available, and the cargo was being tracked by GPS. But somewhere along Highway 2, it just vanished. No wreckage, no distress calls, no trace. I pulled up the last known coordinates. They were 15 miles from where I'd found that facility, and according to the final GPS transmission, the truck had been heading toward those same coordinates I'd been given, toward that same empty section of prairie where buildings appear during storms. I tried to contact the company, to warn them about what might have happened, but they wouldn't listen. They think I'm crazy, a driver who had a mental breakdown and invented a story to cope with whatever really happened. They don't believe in facilities that exist between realities, in buildings that hunt, in things that wear the shape of humans, but are anything but. I believe, though. I know the truth. And somewhere out there in the northern plains, during the worst blizzards, that facility is still waiting, still calling to drivers, still collecting cargo and people and trucks, feeding on whatever it is that sustains it, still growing larger, adding more buildings to its impossible architecture, expanding its reach into our reality, one lost driver at a time. Story 6. The Echo Highway. Jennifer Morrison here. I've been driving long-haul routes for 19 years, specializing in overnight runs when traffic is light, and the highways are yours alone. There's something peaceful about driving through darkness with just your thoughts, your music, and the endless white lines disappearing under your hood. I'd driven through every kind of weather condition, every type of road, every hour of the day and night. I thought I'd seen everything the highway had to offer. Then came the blizzard of January 2023. I was hauling electronics from Chicago to Minneapolis, running up I-94 through Wisconsin. The forecast had called for moderate snow, nothing concerning. But weather in the upper Midwest is famously unpredictable. By the time I reached Eau Claire, the moderate snow had transformed into a full-scale blizzard. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet, and the wind was pushing my trailer around like a toy. I should have stopped. Every rational instinct told me to pull off, find a safe place to wait it out. But I was behind schedule, and this load was time-sensitive. Consumer electronics for a major retail chain that needed to be on shelves for a big sale. I made the decision to push forward, a decision I've regretted every day since. Around 2 a.m., about 40 miles south of Menominee, something strange happened. I was driving through a particularly intense section of the storm when I saw taillights ahead. Another truck, maybe a quarter mile in front of me. I felt relieved. Following another driver's lights would make navigation easier in these conditions. But as I got closer, I noticed something odd. The truck ahead was the same model as mine, a 2021 Freightliner Cascadia with a 53-foot dry van trailer. Same configuration, same color scheme. Could be coincidence. Freightliners are common, and corporate fleets often use identical paint jobs. Then I noticed the license plate. I couldn't read the full number through the snow, but I could make out enough. It was my license plate. The truck ahead was my truck. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was misreading the numbers. The snow and darkness were playing tricks on my vision. I tried to pull alongside to get a better look, but the other truck matched my speed exactly. When I accelerated, it accelerated. When I slowed down, it slowed down. I grabbed my CB microphone. Breaker 19. This is Night Runner on I-94 northbound. Freightliner Cascadia. You got your ears on. The radio crackled, and I heard a voice respond. My voice. Copy, Night Runner. I read you. My hands went numb on the steering wheel. That was my voice, my cadence, my speech patterns. I was listening to myself respond to my own transmission. This isn't funny, I said into the mic. Who is this? How are you doing this? I don't know, my own voice replied. I don't understand what's happening. Are you me? Am I you? I looked ahead at the truck. Through the snow, I could just barely see the silhouette of the driver. Same build, same posture, same way of sitting that I'd developed over 19 years of long-haul driving. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Let's figure this out logically. What's your name? Jennifer Morrison. Where are you coming from? Chicago. Hauling electronics to Minneapolis. What's your load? Consumer electronics. For a retail chain. There's a big sale coming up. Every answer matched my situation exactly. I was talking to a duplicate of myself, driving a duplicate of my truck, hauling a duplicate of my cargo. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was impossible, but the evidence was right in front of me. How did you get here? I asked. I was driving through the storm, the other Jennifer said. Then suddenly I saw taillights ahead. Another truck. I'm following it now. Ice flooded my veins. What do you mean, you're following another truck? It's right ahead of me. Same model as mine. Same everything. I tried to call them on the CB and... Oh God, it's me. The truck ahead of me is me. I looked in my rearview mirror. Through the snow and darkness, I could see headlights behind me, getting closer. Another truck, same model, same configuration. There's another one behind me, I whispered into the CB. Behind me too, said the Jennifer ahead. And I just saw another one ahead. We're in a convoy. All of us. All driving the same truck. I tried to count the vehicles. At least 6 that I could see. Maybe more disappearing into the snow ahead and behind. All identical. All running at the same speed, maintaining perfect spacing. What do we do? One of the other voices asked. I couldn't tell which one anymore. They all sounded exactly like me. I don't know, another voice responded. Maybe we should stop, pull over and figure this out. No, a different voice said. I tried that. About 10 minutes ago from your perspective. I pulled onto the shoulder, and the convoy just kept going. But then another truck appeared behind me, and I was part of the convoy again, like I'd never left. That's impossible, I said. How can you have tried something 10 minutes ago if you're me right now? I don't know. Time is wrong here. I think we're all the same person at different points, driving through the same storm, but somehow we're all existing simultaneously. My fuel gauge was at 3/4 full. I asked the others to check theirs. Some said 3/4. Some said half. Some said nearly empty. We were all driving identical trucks, but we were at different points in our journey, different fuel levels, different states of the same trip. What's the last thing you remember before seeing the convoy? I asked. The answers came in, one after another. We'd all been driving through the storm. We'd all reached the same point on I-94, around mile marker 52. And then we'd all seen taillights ahead and fallen in line with the convoy. But we'd done it at different times, according to our memories. Some hours ago, some minutes. One claimed it had been days. "I think we're trapped," one of the voices said, "stuck in some kind of loop. We keep driving forward, but we never actually get anywhere. We just repeat the same stretch of highway, adding another version of ourselves to the convoy each time through." I checked my GPS. It showed me moving north at a steady 50 miles per hour, but the mile markers weren't changing. I'd passed mile marker 52 5 minutes ago, but through the snow, I could see another marker 52 coming up, then another. We were driving forward but covering the same ground over and over. "How do we break out?" I asked. "I don't think we can," another voice replied. "I think this is where we stay now. Driving forever, adding more of ourselves to the convoy until there's nothing but us. An infinite line of Jennifer Morrisons in identical trucks, trapped on an impossible highway. I refused to accept that. There had to be a way out. I'd gotten into this situation, so there had to be a way to reverse it. I started experimenting. I turned off my headlights. The convoy continued. I turned them back on. I tried different speeds, but the convoy matched me perfectly. I tried calling other channels on the CB, but every channel had the same voices. My voice, talking to itself, from different points in the loop. That's when I noticed something. The newest voice, the most recent Jennifer to join the convoy, always sounded slightly different. More panicked, more confused, like she hadn't fully processed what was happening yet. That meant new versions were still being added. The loop was still pulling in Jennifers from the normal timeline. "Everyone listen," I said. "The next Jennifer who joins, the newest one, she's still connected to the real world somehow. She just entered the loop. Maybe if we all focus on her, help her maintain that connection, she can pull us out." "How?" multiple voices asked simultaneously. "I don't know, but we have to try." We waited, all of us driving in our impossible convoy. I watched my mirrors for new headlights, watched ahead for any change in the pattern. And then I saw it. A truck approaching from behind, moving faster than the convoy, trying to catch up. The newest Jennifer, not yet fully synchronized with our loop. "New truck approaching from rear," I called out on the CB. "Everyone maintain position. Let her catch up." The truck pulled alongside the convoy. Through my passenger window, I could see the driver. It was me, of course, but this version looked different. Less worn, less tired. She hadn't been trapped as long. Her voice came over the CB. "What's happening? Who are you people? Why do you all look like me?" "Listen carefully," I said. "You're entering a time loop. We're all you, from different points in the loop. You need to break free before you get fully synchronized with us." "How?" she asked, her voice rising in panic. "Your GPS," I said. "Check your GPS. Can you see anything outside the loop? Any roads, any exits, anything that isn't I-94? I heard her checking. Wait. There's a service road, about 2 miles ahead. It's not on my normal maps, but it's showing up now. It leads east, away from the highway." "Take it," all of us said simultaneously. "Take it, and don't look back." I watched as her truck began to pull ahead of the convoy. She was accelerating, breaking the synchronization. The other trucks in the convoy started to flicker, becoming translucent. I could see through my own hands on the steering wheel. "It's working," one of the voices called out. "She's breaking free, and it's collapsing the loop." The newest Jennifer's truck reached the service road and turned off. The moment she left I-94, reality snapped back into place like a rubber band. I was alone on the highway. No convoy, no other trucks. Just me driving through a normal blizzard. My GPS showed I'd traveled 97 miles from Eau Claire. My fuel gauge showed exactly what it should for that distance. I pulled off at the next truck stop and sat there shaking for an hour. I checked my dashcam footage. It showed me driving normally through the storm. No convoy, no other vehicles. Nothing unusual except for a strange gap in the recording. About 15 minutes where the video was corrupted, showing only static and distorted images. But I knew what had happened. I'd been trapped in a time loop on I-94, driving alongside versions of myself from different iterations of the same journey. And somehow, by helping the newest version escape, I'd collapsed the entire loop and freed us all. I completed my delivery to Minneapolis, but I requested a transfer to different routes after that. I don't drive I-94 through Wisconsin anymore, especially not during storms. But sometimes I wonder about those other Jennifers, the ones who were trapped in the loop with me. Did they escape back to their own timelines? Or are some of them still there, driving that impossible highway, waiting for another new version to join so they can try to break free again? 3 months later, I was at a truck stop in Iowa when I met another driver, a woman about my age, who looked familiar. We got to talking, and she mentioned she drove the Chicago to Minneapolis route. She'd recently had a strange experience during a blizzard, she said. She'd seen what looked like a convoy of identical trucks and heard voices on her CB that all sounded the same. I asked her what she did. She said she followed her GPS to a service road and got off the highway. After that, everything went back to normal. She thought she'd hallucinated the whole thing. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't explain that she'd been me, or I'd been her, or we'd both been trapped in a loop together. Some things are better left unexplained. But I knew that the Echo Highway was real, and it was still out there, waiting for the next storm, the next tired driver, the next Jennifer Morrison to enter its loop and join the convoy of herself. Story 7. The Caller in the Snow. Raymond Foster, 43 years old, 15 years behind the wheel of a long-haul truck. I'd built my career on reliability, on always delivering my loads on time no matter what conditions I faced. Rain, sleet, fog, ice. I'd driven through it all without incident. I'd navigated mountain passes in whiteout conditions, crossed bridges in winds that threatened to push my trailer over the side, and once kept a rig running for 36 hours straight when equipment failures stranded me in northern Canada. I thought I was unshakable. I thought nothing could rattle me. Then I got the phone call. December 2021. I was running a load of industrial machinery from Detroit to Billings, Montana. The route took me through the northern tier of states during what turned out to be one of the worst winter storms in a decade. Multiple states had declared emergencies, highways were closing, and meteorologists were using terms like historic and catastrophic to describe the conditions. I should have waited it out, but the delivery deadline was firm, and the customer had made it clear that late arrival meant financial penalties severe enough to potentially bankrupt my small independent operation. So I pushed forward, monitoring weather constantly, taking the safest routes I could find, and keeping my truck equipped and maintained for the worst possible scenarios. I was on I-94 in North Dakota, about 60 miles west of Fargo, when my cell phone rang. I was using my hands-free system, so I answered without checking the caller ID. Traffic was non-existent. Visibility was maybe 30 feet, and any human contact felt welcome in the isolation of the storm. Hello? Raymond. A male voice, calm and professional. This is station operator calling. You need to reduce your speed immediately. There's a jackknifed semi blocking both lanes approximately 1 mile ahead. I eased off the accelerator. Copy that. Thanks for the heads up. Which station is this? Reduced to 10 miles per hour. The wreckage is extensive. I slowed further, peering through the snow for any sign of the accident. Sure enough, about 45 seconds later, my headlights illuminated a massive pileup. 3 trucks, 2 cars, all tangled together, completely blocking the eastbound lanes. If I'd maintained my speed, I would have plowed right into it. I brought my truck to a complete stop about 50 yards back and grabbed my emergency radio. This is commercial vehicle on I-94 westbound, mile marker approximately 312. We've got a major accident blocking both lanes. Multiple vehicles involved. Is emergency services en route? Dispatch responded. Copy that. State patrol and emergency vehicles are delayed due to conditions. Can you provide more details? I spent the next several minutes coordinating with dispatch, providing information about the accident, checking if any of the drivers needed immediate assistance. The phone call that had warned me had disconnected at some point, and when I tried to call back, there was no record of it in my recent calls list. No number, no timestamp, nothing. I shrugged it off. Must have been highway patrol or some kind of emergency services system that didn't log properly. I was just grateful for the warning. I found an alternate route, backtracked, and continued my journey. The storm intensified as I drove through the night. Around 3 a.m., crossing into Montana, my phone rang again. Raymond, station operator. You need to find shelter in the next 15 minutes. The temperature is about to drop to -45. Your truck's heating system has a failing component. You won't be able to maintain safe cab temperature. What? My systems are all showing green. Everything's functioning normally. Check your secondary coolant line, the connection near the heater core. It's developing a leak. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight. I popped the hood and checked the secondary coolant line. There was indeed a small leak, barely visible, just starting to drip. If it had gotten worse while I was driving in these temperatures, I could have lost cab heat in the middle of nowhere. In -45 degrees, that was a death sentence. I patched the leak with emergency sealant from my repair kit, added coolant, and made a note to get a proper repair as soon as I reached a town. But the phone call bothered me. How had this station operator known about a tiny leak in my specific truck? How had they known my name? And why wasn't the call showing in my phone history? I tried calling the number back. Nothing. Just dead air. Over the next 6 hours, as I navigated through the worst of the storm, the phone rang 3 more times. Each time, the same calm voice, identifying himself as station operator, giving me specific warnings about road conditions ahead. A washed-out section of highway, a collapsed bridge, a chemical spill that had created ice patches. Every single warning was accurate. Every single one potentially saved my life. But every call left no record on my phone. And every time I tried to ask questions, who are you? How do you know these things? The line would disconnect. Finally, around 10 a.m., as I was approaching Billings and the storm was beginning to clear, my phone rang again. The same voice, but this time there was something different about it. A sadness, maybe, or a resignation. Raymond, station operator. This is my final call. Wait, I said. Who are you? How have you been helping me? Why can't I call you back? You need to understand something, the voice said. The calls you've been receiving, they're not happening in your present. They're coming from 7 years ahead, from February 2028. That's impossible. In 2028, a catastrophic failure in emergency communication systems during a major blizzard will result in the deaths of 43 commercial truck drivers. The systems will fail, warnings won't go out, and drivers will encounter hazards without notice. The failures will be traced back to budget cuts, ignored maintenance schedules, and corrupted software. I don't understand. What does that have to do with me? I'm one of the engineers investigating the system failures. During our analysis, we discovered something strange. The emergency systems aren't just failing in 2028. They're creating echoes backward through time. We can send warnings to drivers in the past, to specific individuals who are traveling through similar conditions. We can't save the 43 who die in our timeline, but we can save people in earlier years. Why me? Why not warn everyone? The system is limited. We can only establish connection with drivers who are experiencing specific electromagnetic conditions, specific weather patterns, specific geographic locations. Your truck, your route, your timing, it all created a perfect resonance. You're one of only 8 drivers we've been able to reach across time. I was silent for a long moment, trying to process what I was hearing. If you're from 2028, you already know whether I make it through this storm. You know my future. I do, the voice said quietly. And I'm calling to tell you something important. When you reach Billings, you're going to get an offer for a very lucrative contract. Multiple runs through Alaska during winter months. The money will be excellent, more than you've ever made. You're going to want to take it. Okay, don't take it. On your 3rd run, in January 2023, you'll encounter conditions similar to what you're experiencing now. But there won't be anyone to warn you. The resonance won't be right, and you won't make it. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. You're saying I'm going to die. I'm saying you will die if you take that contract. But you don't have to. Make a different choice. Turn down the Alaska runs. Find other work. You have a daughter who needs you. She needs you at her college graduation, at her wedding, to meet your grandchildren. If you take the Alaska contract, she'll have none of that. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't some kind of elaborate prank? When you reach Billings, check your phone. There will be a message waiting for you. A text from your daughter. She's going to tell you she's engaged. You don't know it yet, but that text was sent 3 hours ago, while you've been out of cell range. The message will be time-stamped, 7:23 a.m. The call disconnected. I drove the remaining distance to Billings in a daze, questioning my sanity, wondering if I'd experienced some kind of hallucination brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. I arrived at the delivery location, unloaded my cargo, and as soon as I parked, my phone started receiving messages. There were several, but one made my heart stop. A text from my daughter Emma, time-stamped 7:23 a.m. Dad, huge news. Jason proposed. I'm engaged. Call me when you can. I sat in my truck and cried. Whether from relief, fear, confusion, or joy, I couldn't tell. Maybe all of them at once. 2 days later, I received the offer. A freight company wanted to contract me for a series of high-value runs through Alaska, winter delivery of critical supplies to remote facilities. The money was extraordinary, easily triple what I normally made. It would have set me up financially for years. I turned it down. The contractor seemed surprised. He pressed me, wanted to know why I'd reject such a lucrative opportunity. I couldn't explain, couldn't tell him that a voice from the future had warned me it would kill me. I just said I was focusing on routes closer to home, spending more time with family. In January 2023, I saw a news report. A commercial truck had gone missing during a severe blizzard in Alaska. The driver was experienced, the truck was well equipped, but he'd encountered unexpected conditions and vanished without a trace. They found the wreckage 3 weeks later, buried under 30 feet of snow. The driver was a man who'd taken the contract I'd been offered. I've never received another call from the station operator. My phone hasn't rung with warnings or advice or messages from the future. But I think about those calls constantly. I think about the engineer in 2028, working to save drivers in the past, because he couldn't save the ones in his own time. I think about the strange intersection of time and technology and desperation that allowed those warnings to reach me. I attended Emma's wedding in 2024. I held my first grandchild in 2026. I'm alive to write this because someone 7 years in my future cared enough to reach back through time and give me information I needed to survive. I've tried to research the emergency communication system failures the voice mentioned. I monitor news reports, industry publications, anything that might give me a clue about what's coming in 2028. I want to prevent it, to somehow warn the authorities that there's a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. But how do you convince people that you received warnings from the future? How do you explain that 43 drivers are going to die because of budget cuts and ignored maintenance? I've sent letters to regulatory agencies, to transportation departments, to anyone who might listen. Most ignore me. A few respond with polite dismissals, suggesting I might be suffering from stress-related delusions. But I keep trying, because somewhere in a timeline I can't fully understand, an engineer cared enough to save my life. The least I can do is try to save his. Sometimes, late at night, I stand outside and look up at the sky, wondering about the nature of time, about whether the future is fixed or fluid, about whether my choices can ripple forward and change what's coming. I think about alternate versions of myself who took that Alaska contract, who died in the snow, whose daughter had to plan a funeral instead of a wedding. I drive safer routes now. I check my equipment obsessively. I never ignore warnings, no matter how minor they seem. And every time my phone rings during a storm, for just a moment, I wonder if it's the station operator again, calling from a future I can't see, trying to save my life one more time. My daughter doesn't know how close she came to losing me. She doesn't know that her father was saved by a voice from 7 years ahead, by an engineer who reached back through time to prevent a death that had already happened in his timeline. Maybe someday I'll tell her. Maybe someday the words will exist to explain what happened during that storm, during those calls that left no record, during the moments when the future tried to save the past. Until then, I keep driving. I keep living. And I keep wondering about the 43 drivers who will die in 2028, whose names I don't know, whose families I'll never meet, but whose deaths I'm trying desperately to prevent because someone once did the same for me.